Supreme Court adjourns Nnamdi Kanu's case to September 14. I'm the best candidate for Senate President, APC's Osita Izunaso insists. Federal government awards $459 billion in 3 contracts, 18 days to handing over. And outside of Nigeria, mystery illness kills 9, leaves 80 ill in Kenya. And U.S. ambassador accuses South Africa of supplying arms to Russia. There are now just 18 days left in the life of the Muhammadu Buhari administration. And with that number of days left, many would ask, is there anything that the administration can still do in its final days? Well, apparently there is. Nigeria's Minister of Transportation, Muazu Sambo, and the Minister of Water Resources, Sulaiman Adamu, explained after this week's Federal Executive Council meeting in Abuja that the mandate of this administration runs till May 29th, and it will continue to perform its duties. So what exactly are those duties that have Nigerians in an uproar? Contracts worth around 327.34 billion naira were awarded by PHQ with barely 18 days left to handing over. Welcome to Politics HQ. I'm Tolulokwe Adeleru Balogun. The Minister of Water Resources, Sulaiman Adamu, explained that the contracted processes take time, saying even if the administration cannot finish what it has started, government, being a continuum, will be the business of the incoming government. 37 agenda items were considered at Wednesday's PHQ meeting, including 2 major projects of water projects and remediation of newly identified hydrocarbon-impacted cities were awarded for Ogoniland. The Federal Capital Territory also got quite a number of approvals, including a 91 billion naira road contract. In all, the contracts were said to be worth a little over 300 billion naira. The breakdown includes transportation getting some 12.63 billion naira, sports getting 8.4 billion naira, aviation receiving 3.84 billion naira, Ogoni projects getting about 129.8 billion naira, with the FCT receiving a little over 130 billion naira, and the IRS building purchased in Abuja and Port Harcourt going to about 10 billion naira. My guests tonight are Shaibu Idris, economist, and Farouk Bibi Farouk, public affairs analyst. Gentlemen, welcome to Politics HQ.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. Good evening, Nigerians, or rather the viewers, wherever we be.
And it looks like we've lost Mr. Farouk for now, the connection to him, but I'm sure he'll join us back. So, Mr. Idris, let me start with this. There's one thing that Nigerians have asked for when it comes to government work as a continuum from one administration to the other, because we have seen situations where work will be ongoing, administration will leave, and it will end up being abandoned. There was even a bill presented to the National Assembly due to this. But this situation seems to be raising serious questions. So let's start from there. 320-something billion awarded by PHQ, which still has another 2 possible meetings before the handing over to another administration. Is this something worth Nigerians making noise about, that in the final days of this administration, we're seeing requests for loans and such amounts of money being awarded?
In general, I will say there should be cause for concerns on the fact of the matter that the nation, quote and unquote, is near bankrupt because we do not have money. As of today, the last statistic that was released by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics and the World Bank posit that about 96% of our revenues are going to service our debt. So to that extent, we need to be concerned and we need to be worried. But the angle, the journalists and in particular, quite a number of you are pointing, I don't think is a cause for concern, i.e., the government has just about 17 or 18 days to go. Like the 2 ministers have rightly said, government is a continuum. So like also the adage goes, soldier come, soldier goes, barracks remain the same. These contracts wouldn't have possibly been assessed in the last 24 hours. not even in the last 24 days. So there must have been series of meetings, tender, scrutinization, this and that, leading to the positions, papers being prepared by the respective ministries that made the presentation at PHQ yesterday or this afternoon. So really, as far as the process of the award of the contract is concerned, vis-a-vis the remaining days of this administration, I don't think there is a cause for concern. But as it relates to the financial capacity of the country, as at today, there is cause for concern.
All right, Mr. Idris, I'll stop you there because we'll get into that in the second part of the conversation tonight. Because even on the same day that PHQ was announcing the approval of these contracts, we heard from the Budget Office of Nigeria, and of course, there's a conversation around debt sustainability. But Mr. Farouk, let me break this down a little bit more. Some of the questions being raised also center around the need for some of these contracts. There's 3.4 billion naira as a post-contract consultancy fee for the construction of a second runway at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja. The council also approved some 449.9 million naira for the engagement of consultants for the development of a master plan for 17 airports in the country. 10.3 billion naira was approved for the construction of a multi-story office complex for the Federal Inland Revenue Service in Lagos. There's also the approval of the establishment of the National Institute of Domestic Security in Osun State, which had a budgetary provision of 285 million in 2022 and now 360 million in 2023. So Nigerians are hearing these sums coming at the end of this administration that has also had its fair share of corruption scandals, and they wonder. So when it comes to raising dust about the final days of this administration and some actions being taken, what do you think?
Thank you very much. I think Nigerians are entitled to the doubts they have, and they are entitled to questioning these actions. I agree with my brother Shaibu that government is a continuum, but administrations are not continuums. Everyone knows that at a point in time, you have to hand over to somebody, and you need to hand over responsibly and reasonably. And having put us in a situation where you are handing over a totally bankrupt economy, together with the fact that it is an overburdened, over-debted economy. Like he has explained, 96% of the income is going back to repay debts that are mostly been taken by this same administration. I do not think that it is fair on any incoming administration to start inheriting contracts that were just awarded weeks before the end of this government. I think it is totally reckless. It is like Obasanjo was saying, it behaving like a drunken soldier. It's a swoop, last swoop at our treasury. And we all know that if corruption exists, which it does, and there is no effort, or even the effort attempts to stop corruption have totally failed in this government, that contracts do not come free in Nigeria, that the awarders of contracts do not go home free, believing that they have done a patriotic job or duty. Ultimately, some percentages get paid upfront. You would not have the evidence today because the person who signs the contract is not in a problem of payment or implementation and so on. But we know the culture. So to be an honest government, to keep the name of integrity that this government wanted to present from the beginning, it would have at least finished all its contracts. And I mean, a performing government should be at this point choked up with programs and projects that they needed to commission, that they have already contracted and finished successfully and are ready for commissioning for the last 1 year. That is what we would have been seeing. But unfortunately, in 7 years, we have never seen the president visit an ongoing project. I don't think I've never seen anyone. So there was just spending of the money at a manner in which they wanted to, never going to check on these projects. And at the end of the day, we have so many uncompleted projects, so many of them. I think the only cover this government could have maybe that it is the same party coming in, but I do not think even at the same party, the government is being fair to the next incoming administration. I do not think it's fair.
And that's a conversation we'll pick up in the second half of this show tonight. But Mr. Idris, let me come back to you. This is also coming, as I mentioned earlier, at a time where Nigeria's debt sustainability is in question. So the Director General of Nigeria's Budget Office, Ben Akabweze, described the country's debt profile as unsustainable and noted that Nigeria was fast exceeding its limited borrowing space. While we'll have a further conversation about debts, it's imperative in this conversation because this was also a statement, a speech he gave yesterday. At the same time, FEC was announcing the award of these contracts. And while this is not the highest number of contracts FEC has awarded, its timing and concerns about debt make it somewhat conspicuous. So in terms of the economic state of the Nigeria that is today, that President Buhari is handing over, where do we stand?
Tolu, thank you very much for that question. Whoever eventually becomes, the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and to serve as president for the next 4 years, will have enormous amount of challenges to grapple with. Number one, there is the immediate need to consider and reconsider and indeed take a decisive step to stem corruption. The leakages are too much and too many levels of leakages. One side of the divide is we must be able to reduce wastages and manage our resources even more efficiently and effectively. Number two, yes, the country is bedeviled with debt, but remember, we can go back to these debtors, to our creditors rather, and ask them to renegotiate with us the terms and conditions of the debt. Instead of say 7 or 10 years or 15 years of the bonds that we have, we may be able to get some of these bonds renegotiated and extended to 15 or 20 or 30 years. Last but not the least is to look at the income side. Listen, we are a country of about 220 million. As at last count, we have less than 750,000 companies paying tax. And when we check at the CAC, the Corporate Affairs Commission, we have over 10 million registered companies. Now, 10 million registered companies, assuming that only 50% of them are operational, then we have 5 million registered companies. Of these 5 million registered companies, only about 10% of them are, captured under the tax bracket of the Federal Inland Revenue Service. Is that a pass mark? Obviously, in any examination, 10% is a total failure. So definitely there is need to widen the tax dragnet, not necessarily the need to increase the tax rate with a view to earning more revenue. I align my thoughts to the Honorable Minister of Finance, Her Excellency Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed, that our major issue is revenue, and we need to address that. Secondly, when you look at the value-added tax, our VAT rate today is somewhere around 7.5%, and quite a number of climates are charging up to 17 to 20%. I think there may be a need to marginally increase that to say 10%, and there are less than 25,000 companies that are paying this VAT. Can't we look at the level of generation? Some of these companies are even collecting the VAT from customers and they are not remitting to the government. So, if you look at the two sides of the divide, one side, the income, we need to widen the scope and generate more. The other side is the management of our waste or resources. We will be able to take some measures. And I believe Bola Ahmed Tinubu, that has been declared the winner of the election, once he is sworn in, he is likely going to take decisive position on petroleum product subsidy, the need to invest more in the petroleum industry so that we can increase our production capacity from somewhere around 1.2, 1.5 million barrels to go back to the level where we used to be at 2.2, 2.5 million barrels per day.
Okay.
The third crude oil we need to also address. So by the time you put all these factors and the courageous decision to take, we're likely going to come out of these economic doldrums that we have found ourselves.
And it's interesting you mentioned crude oil production because according to OPEC right now, Angola has overtaken Nigeria as the continent's top producer for April because our production again has declined below 1 million barrels per day. But Mr. Farouk, I saw a bit of reaction when Mr. Idris was speaking in terms of the kind of economy or the Nigeria that President Buhari will be leaving behind. Would you like to speak to that very quickly?
Well, I'd like to say that honestly, it's a disappointing administration that we have had that is outgoing. The ideas that you develop an economy on the basis of expansion of exportation of crude and then increment of importation of all other goods, and assuming that you could have a base where you could just tax the poorest country in the world. We have the poorest people in the world. 133 million of us are in multidimensional poverty. Now, where are the revenues coming from, for example? Our problem for me is productivity. We have been unable to utilize our knowledge and brains to be productive. We import everything. In the 8 years of this administration, and let me say the first administration since 1960, at least one item was targeted and we had about 60-65% success in the reduction of its importation, that is rice. Every other item, the millions of products we consume are about 70 to 90% foreign dependent. And we are only depending on the dollar coming from the oil. And the dollar coming from the oil is only the exportation of the crude oil, not the processing of the crude oil. That gives us less than 2% of the value of the crude oil we are selling. Less than 2.5% at least of the value of the oil goes away because you are taking it away as crude. We have not decided to change the processes. We thought that by 2015, when change was coming, those were the kind of changes that would come. We are still a contract rental economy. We are still dependent on increasing the barrels of oil we can sell. I tell you, Saudi Arabia is diversifying, is creating more wealth for itself. It's still feeling unsatisfied. It's producing 10 million barrels of oil per day. They have less than 60 million people in Saudi Arabia. We are 200 million plus, 2 million barrels, and we still think we can move that 2 million barrels to satisfy our needs. I think we have to think wider than that. I think it's beyond accounting. It's if the Minister of Finance thinks revenues are a problem, well, probably from the accounting point of view, where they just think that if you increase revenue, you will get income to spend. But you have to have a productive base before you create a revenue base, before you create the revenue. Where is the productive base? What improvement has happened in the productive capacity of Nigeria since the beginning of this administration? Or at least you can extend it, because I don't always want to blame Buhari alone. My greatest cross with Buhari was the promise, the hope that there was going to be change. But it has been business as usual from 1960. Nigeria cannot find that money, that wealth, that revenue to develop unless it uses the knowledge it has, or it creates the knowledge to be productive enough by using the resources it has for itself and exporting the value of those resources, not the raw materials or the raw value of those resources. The finished value of those resources is where the wealth is, not the raw value of those resources. And we can't just think this as simple as ABC.
So let's talk about something else that should be simple, because I want us to come back now to the FEC awarding contracts. Minister of Transportation Muazu Sambo maintained that the administration will continue to perform its duties until May 28th, asking if the administration is expected to stop functioning 1 month before the next administration comes in, simply because they're coming to the end of their tenure. So, Mr. Farouk, I want to stay with you on this, because earlier you described this situation around the awarding of contracts as unfair. Is this really as simple as the minister seems to be making it out? I have a contract until May 28th, May 29th. I'm going to work until that day. So whatever you see, take it. Is it as simple as that?
You see, contract is a revenue for political office holders and big officials of government. That is the basic idea of contracts. They are not even used for the real productivity you expect. 90% of Nigerian contracts are given to foreign companies that take 90% of the value outside. So when you see these contracts being insisted on, it is because there is direct value in the process of awarding the contract, in signing the contract. Very few contracts have a commitment of implementation behind them. Very few contracts. So if somebody is telling you, I can sign contract until the 28th, he's telling you that I can make money until the 28th. He's not telling you that I can deliver until the 28th. Why not say, this is what we have delivered and we'll continue delivering on the 28th? It's very, very, pedestrian and unintelligent to assume that giving out contracts creates development. Giving out contracts does not create development. It creates money for the political class. That is what it does. A country that is serious would be making the environment, creating an environment for things to be produced, for things to come up. Contracts for what? Even roads can be made by private sector if it creates the enabling environment. And when you give these contracts, the value that comes to the Nigerian workers is very minimal. You don't even engage your people. You engage all the foreigners to come and do it, and or machineries to come and do it. I mean, 25 years ago when I went to China, an estate that would be demolished by hammers and sickles because people needed work to do. You don't go and bring bulldozers. So you don't calculate what value of the money you give out in contracts comes to your people. You just give contracts in the name of hype, aesthetics, so that you can come out and say, I'm the person who gave out the contract of the tarmacs or landing strips. And that is all. And every other value of that thing goes abroad, goes away. And you have increased poverty by giving out that contract, but you have made some money for yourself and your cronies. That's just what we understand by contracts.
Okay.
That's it.
So, Mr. Idris, I saw a reaction from you as well. And I want to pick up on the value of the contracts because Minister Sulaiman Adamu also said that the administration should be given full credit because it has continued since 2015 to implement projects and programs that it did not initiate, but that through its own assessments, it decided were good for the country. So in terms of credits being due to the Buhari administration when it comes to contracts, what do you think that credit should go? And could you possibly speak to what Mr. Farouk has said in terms of how the contracts we oftentimes sign in Nigeria really end up not necessarily transferring or transmitting true value for the country or its citizenry?
Tolu, let's be very practical, sincere, realistic, and fair. I live in Lagos, and you're picking me from Lagos. Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, the contract for the repair and expansion of that road was granted by President Obasanjo. The rail lines that we have today, Lagos to Ibadan, Kaduna to Abuja, those were, contracts granted during Goodluck Jonathan time. These contracts have been concluded. Today, to God be the glory, I need to go to Ibadan. I can just dash to Yaba and get to Ibadan in 1 hour, 30 minutes and come back. So yes, some of those projects have been, continued and concluded. But for me, I'm sorry, I'm not going to give credit to President Muhammadu Buhari. These contracts were, funded by the monies of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So if I say, thank you, Buhari, for doing this contract, it's akin to me going to an ATM machine, slotting my card, and then the machine gives me 5,000 naira or 10,000 naira, and I say, thank you, GT Bank, or thank you, ATM machine. So I wouldn't take that. I mean, what is there to thank them? I believe government, as I said, is a continuum. Administration may not necessarily be continuum. Processes, civil servants are there. There must have been due diligence regarding what we require and what we do not require. let's again be fair. On Friday, I left Lagos in the morning, landed, in Abuja. By afternoon, there was a mishap, and the airport was closed for 8 hours because we have only one runway in Abuja. Is that good? And I personally did speak with Hadi Sirika, the Minister of Aviation, some few years or months back, begging him to make sure that a second runway is constructed in Abuja. If today it is constructed or the award is being given, I will say glory be to God. I will, of course, align my thoughts and agree with Farouk that really, are we getting value for our money? The answer is no. Quite a number of these contracts are bloated. They are too expensive. When you index or you juxtapose them with similar contracts being executed in other climate, you will cry for this country. And this didn't start during Buhari's regime. Remember, the Murtala Mohammed International Airport, a replica of it was constructed in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. Even as far back as 40 years ago when this airport was constructed, it was reputed that our own airport was 10 times more expensive than Dar es Salaam, similar airport constructed in Dar es Salaam. So did this start yesterday? No. The Buhari did promise us change. Did we see the change? No, we didn't. This gentleman did promise us that he doesn't even believe in petroleum subsidy. Now, how much are we spending? For his 8 years, we couldn't even fix the refinery. None of the refineries have been fixed, talk less of giving us another one. There are so many areas that you will touch on to say we haven't done well.
Okay.
Of course, let me conclude with my also keen into the fact that apart from the revenue challenge, we also have the productivity challenge. We have quite a number of agricultural produce, commodities that need to be processed locally before they are exported. What are we doing with sesame seeds, ginger, cashew nut, cocoa? Why can't we have production machineries or plant and machinery that will process these and expand the economy so that we can create employment? I do align my thoughts with my brother Alhaji Farouk along those lines. But I think in certain areas we also need to be fair and reasonable and at least just and equitable.
Okay, so as I said earlier, Nigeria's debt profile and the sustainability of such is a major concern. On the same day that the announcements of these contracts were made by PHQ, we also heard from the Budget Office about the sustainability of Nigeria's debt. And that's where the conversation will be headed next, gentlemen. When we come back, we'll look at the economy and the debt that President Muhammadu Buhari is handing over. Do stay with us. Still with me tonight on Politics HQ are Farouk Bibi Farouk, Public Affairs Analyst, and Shuaibu Idris, Economist. Now, we switch gears just away from the Federal Executive Council's contract awarding to the state of Nigeria's economy. As President Muhammadu Buhari prepares to leave office, Africa's largest economy will likely face a stalled economy in the year or years to come. In the first 4 months of 2022, the cost of servicing debt surpassed government's retained revenue by 310 billion naira. While Nigeria's crude oil production climbed before the end of the year last year, the country has lost its title of Africa's largest crude oil producer after production went to around 900,000 barrels per day. And even now, once again, Angola has overtaken the country as the continent's largest crude oil producer after production dropped below 1 million barrels per day. The government also expects inflation to remain in double digits, averaging 17.16% next year. So let's start with that. Because we're in the final days, it's an opportunity for us and Nigerians to score the Muhammadu Buhari administration. So, Mr. Idris, I want to start with you in this second part of the conversation. Under President Buhari, we saw Nigeria witness 2 recessions in about 6 years. We also faced COVID-19 as well as the impact of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Now, as he prepares to leave office, what are the economic indices we should look to judge his administration on?
Wow. Tolu is a tough one. let's start with exchange rate. President Muhammad Buhari came to power when our exchange rate, Naira-dollar relationship was somewhere around 320 Naira. The official exchange rate today is what? Somewhere around 430, 440 Naira to a dollar. The parallel market is somewhere around 740 Naira to a dollar. Now, the juries are out. You will agree with me that certainly we have witnessed enormous amount of devaluation. Fast forward, let's talk about the level of debt. We're talking of somewhere around 83, 84 trillion Naira debt as at today. Where were we in 2015 when President Buhari took over? The debts were somewhere around 15, 17, maximum 22 trillion Naira. Has Mr. Buhari done well in these two indices? I think, to the best of my knowledge, I would, even a student of English will say that from 22 trillion to somewhere around 84 trillion is not so good a performance. From an exchange rate of 320 to 450 Naira, it's also not a good performance. Now, let's look at the gross domestic product. We happen to have rebased our GDP, which is just what we call in banking financial engineering. So we engineered the data, and we are now claiming to be Africa's largest economy. Yes, okay, based on the figures, we are largest economy. But Alhaji Farouk did give us some figures before we went on the break as far as poverty level is concerned. Nigeria has turned to be the poverty capital of the world. Today, we have close to about 150 million Nigerians that are living below the poverty line. Is it good indices? No, I don't think it is. Life expectancy, where are we? Somewhere around 53, 55 years as at today. Is that the best? Japan today has life expectancy of 80 years. Quite a number of African countries have life expectancy of 65, 70. Nigeria is battling with 55. Is that good enough? I don't think it is. In terms of generating capacity, electricity generating capacity, or even what we call misery index, we measure the level of pens Nigerians go. Where are we as at today? Misery index is somewhere around 57%. Wow. When Muhammad Buhari came into power, the misery index was somewhere around 30-something%. So in general, as far as the statistics, economic statistics are concerned, I'm not sure if anybody will give President Buhari a pass mark. However, I like to pause here to say there are also areas where we can say is done reasonably well in terms of project implementation.
Okay, Mr. Idris, before we get to the areas we think he's doing reasonably well, let me interject here because you mentioned poverty, and that was actually my next question, and I want Mr. Farouk to take this on because it was one of the biggest promises of this administration was to fight poverty in Nigeria. We heard continuously about lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in 10 years. I think it was about 2021 that the president was applauding himself for having lifted some people out of poverty. But it seems to be the reverse is the case because even the National Bureau of Statistics in late 2022 said that no fewer than 133 million Nigerians were multidimensionally poor. And this comes even with many initiatives that this administration has put into place to address poverty. We've had conditional cash transfer. We've had school feeding as well. One of the reasons that subsidy has even remained is because the administration talks about the impact on Nigeria's most vulnerable and poorest. So, Mr. Farouk, let's look at that before we look at what the administration has gotten right. Where do you think this government has gone wrong when it comes to fighting poverty?
I think the first thing is that they do not understand what poverty is. Poverty is a state of mind. It's the inability for you to find proper ways of prosperity. And that starts from what is in your head, what is going on around you. It's not about handouts. handouts do not solve poverty issues. So this government spent billions, almost about many trillions as handouts. Handouts to people that you cannot even account for. They can't even account for. That's people who, when they collect 10,000, are not sure it's either 10,000 or 3,000. How could you give them money and expect that you have brought them out of poverty? I think it is quite unfortunate. You need to address poverty by bringing awareness, intellectual awareness, education, creating productive base, like I said in the past, making sure that every activity in your nation rotates around using your resources, thereby applying your people to take control of those resources and making value out of those resources. Poverty was lifted in China. Poverty was lifted in India, in Vietnam. They did not lift it by giving handouts. They gave it by concentrating on education for about a period of 10, 15, 20 years. And then making sure that the educated people they create are allowed access to resources and allowed the environment to produce from the resources available in the country. Then it also comes from being protective of your economy. You cannot stop poverty while you are interested in other people's products. Your entire elite depends on the consuming other people's products. And it becomes the fashion in it. You cannot stop poverty when all actions of government are import-oriented, using resources to be comfortable, So I think they got it wrong by not addressing the right areas. If you insist on productivity, being local, like when my brother talked about GDP, I personally do not accept GDP as an indices for development. What is domestic, for example, in our GDP? There is nothing you can point to that has a higher level of domestic input than foreign input. Nothing you can look at, nothing, including the food you eat every day. The energy you expend every day to come to work is about 60% foreign, because the food you eat has seedlings that are foreign, pesticides that are foreign, fertilizer that are foreign, water that is created from mostly foreign chemicals. Everything you do is foreign. Unless you check those areas and control the expenditures of those areas and internalize them and make them productive processes of wealth generation within your own economy, then you cannot go out of poverty. It is not an Owambe party where you come and announce what you want to announce and suddenly it goes. No, it's a thought process. It's a dedicated process. And yes, this government did not take over from a government that was going on the right direction. But instead of doing the right thing, they even forgot about, for example, looking at the economy in its proper sense.
Okay.
One of the things I take offense in this government is they did not have an economic team. They have one of the most powerful propaganda team that has ever been produced in the history of this country. Even the Civil War did not have the nature of propaganda people they have. But in security and in economy, they have zero. Nothing in the villa talking about the direction of the economy, like they are always talking about the direction of their propaganda, defending wrong or right with words. The best people in the world, they have them. But we have the best economies you can find in the world, including Shaibu there. Shaibu is one of the best accountants you can find in the world. But this government will run away from economic issues and now tell you that they have done something about poverty.
Okay.
I don't know.
So unfortunately, time is not with us, but we're going to continue a series as we look at the final days of the Muhammadu Buhari administration and look at several instances and indices along the economy, politics, and of course, security and much more. But there's one final question I want to put to the two of you. And Mr. Idris, you'll have the opportunity now to very quickly touch on the things you think the administration has gotten right. And this question looks at the future. So Ben Akabweze has pointed out that Nigeria now has very limited borrowing space, not because of our debt to GDP ratio is high, and that's a conversation or a controversy for another day, but because he says the country's revenue is too small to sustain the size of its debt. Our GDP growth is probably just at the same level, if not even behind our population growth. And for many people, this explains our high debt service ratio. We have a president coming in, going to be sworn in May 29th, and who is going to come in and face a number of economic issues. So, Mr. Idris, I start with you. What options do you think the Tinubu administration will really have when it comes to the precarious financial situation Nigeria finds itself right now? And you can quickly add about the things you believe this administration has gotten right. Let's make this about 2 minutes so that I can also get to Mr. Farouk.
Buhari came in. We had 2 recessions and the economy bounced back. I think we need to give him credit along that line. Yes, he came in also at a time when the Boko Haram activities was so high and bombings in Abuja, Kano, Kaduna, the bombings were coming into Lagos. And now we have reduced that significantly. Yes, banditry has reared its ugly head. But again, the security situation, as far as the Boko Haram is concerned, the government has done fairly well. And I think in terms of the political spectrum, there are quite a number of elections in state houses of assembly, in governor's seat, that ordinarily past government were meddling into electoral process. Buhari has remained a little bit centric and aloof to some of those happenings without necessarily putting so much overbearing position. Fast forward, what should Bola Ahmed Tinubu do? Like I did say before, number one, there is need to address the issue of the debt. We need to engage our creditors so that we can have a longer repayment time. We need to diversify the economy. My dear brother Alhaji Farouk has alluded to this. There is need to look at the productive sector of the economy and make us reduce the import dependence of this economy. We have an innocent vehicles that are being produced in the eastern part of the country. Here, the National Assembly insisted that they must be given Prado Jeep produced in or manufactured in Japan. Why are we not looking inward? Number 3, we need to expand the tax bracket. Like I did say, 25,000 companies or 25,000 companies paying VAT. Is that right? Certainly no. We need to probably be having 5, 10, 20 million organizations paying the tax, because some of these are collecting the taxes and pocketing. Again, the companies that are paying income tax, just about 750,000. Is that realistic? Is that fair? These are areas Bola Ahmed Tinubu needs to look at. Now, and lastly, he needs to be courageous to pick a few impunity actions that have been done by this administration and get the culprit to be punished. The idea is we need to lead by examples. We need to be sure that, yes, if you commit offense, you will be punished. So there is need to have the courage to pick some of the miscreant and get them appropriately punished. The idea of punishment is not a hatred. It's just for it to serve as a deterrent to others. And I think if we can get this, we will definitely have a better and robust economy to run. Of course, like I did say, there is need to remove the petroleum subsidy. There is need to look at the power sector, and there is need to look at the areas where we demand so much of foreign goods and services. Why is our educational system dysfunctional? Why is our health system dysfunctional? What do we need to fix this? Alhaji Farouk has rightly alluded to the fact that we have some of the best friends in the country, be it in engineering, in economics, in ICT. We are not using them. And, quite a number of times, you pick people, we take our 5th 11 when we have the first 11 that we can put forward that we seldom ask to come on board.
All right. Unfortunately, it seems we've lost connection with Mr. Farouk, and it would have been great to hear his final thoughts on this as well, as we look at about 18, let's say 17 days now before the Tinubu administration is sworn in and takes over an economy and a country that seems to be in a very precarious situation. But this is where we'll wrap the conversation today. I do know that we'll have you back with us sometime soon, Mr. Shaibu Idris, economist, and I'll go ahead and also thank my other guest, Farouk Bibi Farouk, public affairs analyst. 17 days to handing over, swearing in. There are a lot of conversations to have, and I look forward to having you join me on those conversations.
Thank you very much for having me, and good evening. And
All
keep
right.
the good work, Ms. Tolu.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me.